Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Game Plan podcast. My name is Leo Howell, and I am joined by Matt Harmon. Matt, how are you doing this evening?
Great, Leo. A lot of stuff going on. Moving into a new apartment on Saturday. I don't know why I felt the need to tell everybody that, but I just did. So,
I mean,
yeah.
we're definitely very, very interested in your moving
My,
situation. So
my life is an open book to anyone who wants to come and read it. So,
that's admirable. That's admirable.
actually, that's probably not true. There's a lot of stuff I should not tell you guys. So, but we'll move on from that.
Yes, please.
Fast and Furious.
Um, hey, I've got a lower third that has a. I have no idea how to use Google Hangouts for the third or fourth week in a row. But this is the Fantasy Game Plan Hangout podcast where we talk about fantasy football strategy and get you ready for the fantasy football week ahead and hopefully answer your questions, although we've been bad about asking for questions. So we don't currently have any, but if you're watching and if you join us at any point, or if you're watching this recorded from the past and want to ask a question for a future episode, please do. We want to answer both strategy-based questions and like specific pick-em questions and things like that. But today, before we get into previewing Week 5 in the NFL, we will talk about trades. And it's something that we talked about a little bit last week in some kind of specific instances. And we both kind of have admitted that we're not really trade experts, and I think we both have a similar mindset on trading, and that we don't really like to do it all that much. But there are a lot of people who are very big on trades. So I'm just curious for your thoughts real quick. Do you kind of have a philosophy on trading? Do you kind of have a way you approach it? And kind of what are your general thoughts and what do you look to do, particularly at this point in the season now that we've got 4 weeks of data on pretty much every player?
Yeah, I think I've said this before, and you kind of said it well, that like I enjoy trading. I want to change up my roster and improve in areas. So I like to try to trade, but the problem is trying to find the right trading partner and trying to gauge how other owners in your leagues feel is so difficult. I mean, it's really tough, and that's why some of this stuff that you talk about, buy low and sell high, it's hard to tell because everybody values players differently. There's rarely ever a consensus about things, and that's the trouble. Trying to value a player across the board is a difficult task. But the thing about, I guess, it's still early in the season. I'm still trying to get really good value for players. I'm trying to buy low, or I'm trying to buy a guy who has shown something so far, but still has a lot left on the table. And I'm kind of trying to unload my bad picks, like Torrey Smith. Perfect example. If I can get anything for Torrey Smith at this point, I probably am. I've been talking to a fellow league mate about trading him for one of his, bench running backs, like Niall Davis or something. I think I've mentioned this a few times this week on Twitter. So that's something that I like to try to do. I'm still in the preliminary stages of trading, though it's time to start kind of transferring away from that. I'm still trying right now to unload my bad picks and also strengthen my roster. I mean, that sounds really general, but I think we're still in the basic stages of trading so far.
Yeah, I feel like one thing that a lot of people tend to do when they trade, though, is unload bad picks that they don't have the capability of unloading. Like,
Yeah.
I do get a lot of trade questions that are, should I get rid of Doug Martin for X? And X is never a running back that I could conceivably start at any time.
Mm-hmm.
And then the question is kind of like, it really depends on your roster, and when you show me your roster and you don't have any other running backs who can start, like, yeah, no, Doug Martin's not good, but if you don't have running backs, trading away a running back isn't going to help that. You need to field a competitive team, and so just trading just to get rid of guys, particularly guys that have any semblance of bounce back capabilities. Like at this point, if you've got no Sean Moreno and somebody's going to offer you something in a trade, if you're going to struggle for the next 4 weeks while he's still out, that's one thing. But if it's a Toby Gerhart, if it's a Doug Martin, if it's a um, just guys like that, guys that have struggled so far. If it's Tom Brady at the quarterback position, you have to have an alternative, and obviously, quarterback that's easier to find. But yeah, like just don't make a trade just to get rid of a guy because he's been bad. Like there's a lot of people who are like, somebody offered me X for Joique Bell, should I take it? And it's never a good deal, but they're just frustrated with Joique Bell's output to this point. Shady McCoy has been the topic of this conversation, all week. It doesn't make sense to just bail on a player and ruin your roster when there's any, like, particularly with a guy like Shady, with a guy like Cordero Patterson. If you bought into him, you bought into this, and you know that there's upside coming. Those aren't necessarily bad picks because they've had 4 bad weeks. Those are guys that you need to hang on to unless you've got alternatives. And like you said, if you've got a Nile Davis and you can line up and say, okay, well maybe I don't need this guy anymore, then you can talk about unloading a guy. Or if it's a Torrey Smith who was already maybe not a key player on your team, and if you like hit on a Kelvin Benjamin and you can replace him, definitely go ahead and trade them. Like I'm all for that. If you took Shady and like DeMarco Murray with your first 2 picks, and you want to try to trade Shady for a competent starting player, like there's some things there that work. The point is that there's never like one set rule of this is a guy you should trade, this is a guy you shouldn't, this is a time you should target to trade, this is a time you shouldn't, because it really all depends on what your roster's like and what your opponent's roster is like in terms of how things kind of fit together. So it's not really I don't like this guy because he hasn't played well. It's, do I have a guy that is underperforming that I can move on from? Or, like you said, with buying low and or selling high, is this guy giving me all? Has this guy given me all he can? And I have alternatives at that spot as well, and that's another thing to consider.
Yeah, definitely, and that's the one thing is like you mentioned, everything is so case by case, and especially when you have strengths on your roster. And I think at this point you should well realize, okay, I'm really strong at wide receiver, or I'm really strong at running back. But you have to be smart about, you can't just pawn these guys off. Just because you're really strong at wide receiver doesn't mean you need to then go start buying a running back, or especially a lesser running back than your receiver, just because you don't have running backs. Don't ever, and that's the thing. You don't ever want to be the guy selling low. You don't want to. I mean, you don't want to. I wouldn't really advise anybody to sell LaShawn McCoy at this point. That's a pretty perfect example because, I mean, you probably took him 1 or 2, in the draft. And while I do think that you got to kind of leave that behind, at some point when you put such a high value on that player, and you can't just then go sell him just to sell him. Like you're right, and especially when you see the path out of this, kind of desert that we're in with a player like that. Like I mean, McCoy. We can string that example out a little bit. You see, in a few months he'll get his offensive line back. He's probably, there's a lot of reports right now that there are little rumblings that he's not all the way healthy. Eventually, he'll probably look a little bit better health wise. So to me, I see where it's going to get better. But a player like Torrey Smith brought that up earlier. I don't really see what's going to change there, other than Flacco's just going to start looking at him more. I don't really see that happening. That doesn't make any sense to me. Why the team is winning, Steve Smith is working. Why is he all of a sudden going to start looking at Torrey Smith? So you weigh those 2 type of examples, and with McCoy, it's like, well, I see how this is going to get better. I can clearly see that path, and I can tell myself that's why this is going to happen. With Torrey Smith, I don't really see that. And those are just 2 examples. That's not a wide stretching thing. I just think that you have to be able to see that this player is going to be better than he is right now in this moment. So don't be a prisoner of the moment. Be able to look forward and project. Like you mentioned with Joique Bell, that's another perfect one. He has a really favorable schedule upcoming, much better than what he's been dealing with lately. Eddie Lacy is another one who dealt with a tough early stretch. So don't be a prisoner of the moment. Be able to project a little bit. You have to do that with trading, on the receiving and the giving side.
Yeah, and one thing with selling low and getting caught selling low is that you don't want to sell low just because the guy's underperforming, like you said. You want to sell low because it's a situation where you are selling at, how do I put this? Basically, like you said, with Shady McCoy, it's that you're selling a guy that has a path to a future because there's talent there, there's a value that you invested in him, and there's a ceiling that continues to remain the same regardless of the struggles that he's had. Whereas with Torrey Smith, the ceiling, what's actually happening to him is lowering his ceiling and lowering his floor. That what's actually happening to him, based on the value that you put into him, like all of these things are totally interconnected. Because, like you said, it's very dependent on where you got a guy in the first place. Like your first round pick, you need to kind of hold on to a little more because you took them in the first round for a reason. There's no other first round pick right now that anyone would really consider trading, even though I do see a lot of people talking about trading Demaryius Thomas. I don't know why you would do that right now on either end. Trading for him just seems like an unnecessary risk unless you can get him for cheap, and trading him away seems like you're not getting the best value you could get for him. So either way, that doesn't make sense to me. But it's really, so much of trading has to do with your roster. Like, you could tell me that somebody offered you Shady McCoy for your Julian Edelman, and I'd say, yeah, take that. But then when you show me your roster and Julian Edelman's your wide receiver 1 and your wide receiver 2 is Marcus Colston, like, maybe you shouldn't. Like, maybe you should reconsider, like, how your roster is constructed and how you want to use the tradable assets you have to improve it. Because ultimately, every week, like, you want to get the best player in a trade and get the guy who's going to score the most points. That's how you win in fantasy football. But you're not always going to make your team better if you're not focusing on how does this impact how I set my roster every week? How does this impact the lineup that I submit every week? So you want to try to get the best players in the trade, but sometimes you also have to have an eye to where are my weaknesses, where are my strengths, where are the underperforming players in my weaknesses, where are the overperforming players in my strengths, and how can I switch those around to get a more balanced, a more advantageous lineup. And like you said, you can look for guys at your positions of weakness that are also currently struggling. Like, you can, if you're weak at running back, if you had Noshawn Moreno as a running back, if you had any of these other guys who were hurt or struggling, maybe Shady McCoy's a guy you go get, and if you've got the wide receivers to do it, I was on the other end of this week because I traded away Shady in a 14-team league for Emmanuel Sanders and Phillip Rivers. And so basically I just did the thing that I probably shouldn't have done, but my team was awful, and I was just trying to spark myself back into things because my quarterback situation was, I was trying to stream quarterbacks in a 14-team league with a bunch of other fantasy writers, and that didn't work. But like, you don't want to be in that situation, because I just gave up a guy who could be a top 5 scorer at his position every week to get a wide receiver who's going to be very boom or bust, and a quarterback who is better than what I had, because I was probably going to wind up starting Jake Locker this week, but not necessarily like an awful, a great option either. So
yeah, and I think too, we do we try to do a pretty good job on this podcast and this show about hitting on the intangible factors of playing fantasy football, and I think a lot of trading comes back to something we talk about a lot. We talked a lot about the draft, was knowing your league, knowing your league mates. Mm-hmm. It can be incredibly painful to try to deal with some people. I mean, not to get too deep into one example, I've got one guy in a league I know right now. He has all the running backs. I have all the wide receivers. It makes perfect sense in the world for us to trade something. I've sent him like 3 offers. He won't have anything of it because every time he thinks I'm trying to trade rob him, except a different R word. But yeah, so it's just so I guess I don't know if you've experienced this, but since writing about fantasy football now, everybody thinks I'm trying to trick them, and now I'm like, no, man, I'm just trying to help. I'm trying to do something that can help us both here. So I don't like that's a very specific example to me, but it's tough. You get a lot of people who are stubborn about trading, and some people like their team. They like the team they took, and they think it's going to work out, and they'll ride it into the dust. Even if they're one
that's kind of my approach a lot of the times, is that I like the team that I drafted, and it's tough for me to get rid of some of those guys. Like, I'll still hold on to a Toby Gerhart right now, and instead of trying to trade him, if somebody wanted to, buy lowish on him. But yeah, it's definitely a situation where you do have guys who are trading differently. There are people who will just pepper you with offers and keep throwing you trades that are just awful. Like we'll use another anecdote in a league I'm in right now, and it's a public league. I don't know this person. I currently am streaming quarterbacks, but it's a 10-team league, so I have my pick of the litter. I can have whatever mediocre quarterback I want who has a good matchup that week. I also have Josh Gordon on my bench, and people have been offering me trades for Josh Gordon for a while. This may be the worst trade that was offered to me, maybe ever in the history of fantasy football. The guy offered Ben Roethlisberger and Michael Floyd for A.J. Green and Josh Gordon. Like, that's if you are. Let me just put it this way: if you're offering trades right now and you start with that, you're basically just insulting the person that you're sending the trade to and saying, "I don't think you know anything about fantasy football. I'm hoping that you accidentally click accept on this trade."
I'm trading this to you when you're drunk.
Because there is something to be said for offering depth for a starter, but you have to look at your opponent's roster as well. Like, you can't just assume that they're going to want your trash to get a star player. There will be some players who will. In this league, I'm starting Matt Asiata and Fred Jackson at running back week in and week out. I could use a running back. And if he would have offered me trash running back and Michael Floyd for A.J. Green and Josh Gordon, I would have countered because he would have been thinking correctly. But in a 10-team league where I picked up Teddy Bridgewater after dropping Robert Griffin III 2 weeks ago, thinking that you're going to offer a waiver wire level quarterback in exchange for, arguably a top 5 wide receiver is silly. So you need to look when you're trading at who you're trading with and not just their needs, but also like their strategies. And like you said, know your league to the point where you know what people are doing. Because if you know me at all, and you followed me in this league, and you've seen that I've dropped and picked up quarterbacks every week, like, that I don't care about quarterbacks, and that I'm making this conscious decision. You can go back and look at the draft recap and saw that I only took Robert Griffin III because he fell into the 13th round. Like, I don't care about that position, and you keep offering me a bad one for my best players that I took deliberately. I took A.J. Green and Des Bryant as my first 2 picks because I wanted to get good skill position players. And so now he's went from offering me garbage for A.J. Green and Josh Gordon to now just offering me trash for Des Bryant. He offered me Stephen Ridley, Michael Floyd, and Ben Roethlisberger for Des Bryant.
Yeah, that's the one thing that drives me nuts, and that's actually better than some things you'll see because, like, this is one thing that drives me nuts about trading is, listen, it's not weighted. Just because you gave me 3 players does not mean no. 3 is better than 1. Like, you can only start 11 for the most part. You can only start X amount of players. Yeah. You can only. It does not matter if you give me 3 garbage players for 1 even halfway decent one. Like, no way. I do not like. What am I even gonna do? For the most part, it's like, am I going to cut the players on my team to take on your bench players? No. So don't do that. That's one thing that it drives me crazy. Like, there's no...
Like, that it's different in Dynasty if you're trading, like, 3 young pieces for a starter. Like, there's totally different. If it's a deep bench Dynasty league, it's totally different. This is a 10-team public Yahoo league with, like, a 5-man bench, and you are giving me 3 guys I can't start for a starter, and... I have no means of accepting it because I would be cutting the guys that you're giving me. Like, you're giving me waiver wire fodder, and it's just ridiculous. So
it is ridiculous, and you're right. It just is about paying attention, and I mean, I will say, not that this is a comment on what we're talking about right now because that's different, but also for the person who gets a trade proposed to them, I think one thing that we do have to realize is like, okay, just because I sent you a trade does not mean that that's my final offer. You don't have to I mean, if someone sends me a trade, I'm always going to counter back with something, unless it's like ridiculously offensive like that. Like there's no starting point in there.
Yeah,
But
if the starting point that you can take is you want one of my wide receivers, but you're not willing to give me anything. So yeah, what do I counter with? I can't do that.
Yeah, you're unreasonable. But if I send you, okay, say I send you Andre Johnson for LaShawn McCoy, I think that's a talking point right there. Yeah. Like that's not.
That's I see that you have LaShawn McCoy. You may not want to stick with him. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one thing I think we need to keep in mind.
Sorry, we both just saw hot takes and hot cakes.
Yeah. My other co-host, who I have a wonderful back and forth relationship with, other than not our sometimes catty relationship, to counteract those two. Yeah, Dan just sent us a rather funny tweet. So that's what we're laughing at.
But anyway, so totally agree, and countering is particularly if it's in a league with people you know, like just assume that the person's well intentioned. If it's a league, if you're in a public league and people are sending you trash offers, like I don't feel like you're obligated to respond to any of them. But if it's a league with people you know at least that they're well intentioned, unless it's an obvious joke. Like if somebody picks up Tim Tebow off of waivers and offers him for Peyton Manning, like you know that that's a joke. But
I think it's a starting point.
I will pick up any bad quarterback off of waivers and trade him to you for Peyton Manning. That's a great way to start the discussion. But no, seriously, there's a lot of stuff that with trading is just tough to even talk about in this sort of setting. So it's a case by case basis, and I'm willing to help like answer questions about it, and but like I said, I don't always make the right decision either. Sometimes I make a decision that's contrary to what I would normally do in a situation. I wouldn't normally sell Shady McCoy, except that it's a team where I, had guys on my bench that I was comfortable with starting at running back, and I needed a wide receiver, I needed a quarterback. So I would say, as a rule, don't trade LaShawn McCoy for Emmanuel Sanders and Phillip Rivers, but that's not a rule because there's different league types. Like there's a league right now where I saw in the 32-team league that I'm running that I've mentioned before. This trade just happened 12 hours ago. Somebody traded Larry Fitzgerald for Kyle Orton.
Oh boy!
But it's a 32-team league, and if you don't have a starting quarterback, you don't have a starting quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to go to the guys who have them, and the person who got lucky enough to be the one to pick up Kyle Orton in the draft, and yes, Kyle Orton was drafted in this league, that puts him in a situation because the guy who made that trade, the quarterbacks on his roster are currently Derek Anderson, Bruce Gradkowski, Kyle Orton, Christian Ponder. So, these are the context things that, as a rule, you don't trade Larry Fitzgerald for Kyle Orton. There's no league scoring setting out there except for this one. So there's always exceptions. There's always differences. It depends on your league. It depends on your roster. It depends on your rules. So the best thing to do is when I've set my roster next week, when I set my roster 5 weeks from now, is my team overall better? And if that means getting a better player and trading away depth, or if that means trading away a better player and getting depth, that can be accomplished. But ultimately, you have to think ahead and not think behind. So if you've got a Joique Bell, if you've got a J.D. McCoy, if you've got, like you said, guys who've had struggle so far have favorable schedules ahead, like you can't get caught up in that. And you can't get caught up in, I don't want to get rid of DeAndre Hopkins because I feel like he's going to keep doing this all season. Like that's just an example that you have to consider for yourself because how valid you think his numbers are is kind of subjective, and it depends on your league and it depends on what other receivers you have. So there's so many different things that go into it that it's really a case by case. And I know that I like answering people's trade questions on Twitter, even though sometimes they're tough to kind of parse out everything. But let's just go through, speaking of that, let's just go through a couple real quick, and I want to get your thoughts on them. These weren't specific questions for the podcast, but they're just questions that I've gotten over Twitter, and I wanted to run past you. We don't talk about Dynasty a lot, so let's talk about Dynasty real quick on this one. The person trading has Doug Martin, Vincent Jackson, and Marcus Wheaton, and was offered Jeremy Hill, Cody Latimer, and Travis Kelce. What are your thoughts on that in a dynasty league?
Okay, I'm sorry. Run that by me one more time. There's a lot of names.
Yes, it was. Doug Martin, Vincent Jackson, and Marcus Wheaton are going away, and Jeremy Hill, Cody Latimer, and Travis Kelce are coming back.
I want the Kelsey side bad.
Here's what happened. I first saw this trade on Twitter, and I didn't see that Jeremy Hill was involved. And so I saw Doug Martin, Vincent Jackson, and Marcus Wheaton for Cody Latimer and Travis Kelce. And that was still tempting because of how good Kelce is.
Yeah.
But I'm not a big fan of Cody Latimer at all.
Oh, really?
I don't really see what people see in him. I feel like obviously he's in a good situation with Peyton right now. How much more time does Peyton have left? And Brock Osweiler is not going to set the world on fire. So,
yeah, I guess what you have to hope for with Latimer, sorry to cut in there, but I guess what you have to hope for with Latimer is that by the time Peyton leaves, but who knows when that is, this, like I said, best case scenario is that by the time Peyton leaves, he's hit that point in his development that he can withstand that, but you're right, it is a question.
Yeah, and it's just, he's not a guy that I'd want to invest in when there are other young receivers. Not necessarily Wheaton. Like, I don't think that Wheaton's necessarily, any better. I feel like actually Latimer's probably a better prospect than Wheaton at this point, but we won't get into all that unless you agree and just.
I agree.
Okay, cool. But yeah, so then once I realized Jeremy Hill was in it, like I'm saying yes to that unless you're contending this year. If you're contending this year, you want Vincent Jackson is the best player in this trade.
Yeah.
And you want to keep Vincent Jackson if you have him, and Marcus Wheaton is going to contribute more this year than Latimer. So. Obviously Doug Martin is a huge question mark, and you are using his name value in this deal to get good prospects, and I like that. In a dynasty league I'm in, I couldn't have traded Doug Martin for peanuts.
Yeah.
With the other owners in my league, I actually wound up getting a second-round rookie pick and Stevie Johnson for him, I think. I was just unloading him because we only have to start one running back, so he was just never starting. It's really there's 6 flex spots or whatever. Like I said, league settings are very important. When you only start one running back, you don't need a guy like that. But anyway, it wasn't Stevie Johnson, by the way. I picked up Stevie Johnson on waivers. But it's that caliber of player. You would have said gross no matter what I said.
Yeah. Here, I got one real quick. And this is actually just I've been talking with a guy, one of my followers I talk with a lot. He asks me a lot of questions, and I appreciate that. I enjoy the back and forth. So he asked me earlier today. This isn't a specific example, but I kind of want your opinion on it. Who are the running backs you would trade Megatron for right
now? Charles.
Yeah.
DeMarco. Le'Veon?
Yeah, see, I honestly, when I just actually responded to this, and he sent it to me a few hours ago, I said none. I mean, it's tough right now with his injury situation.
I would definitely trade him for Charles and DeMarco.
Would you? I mean,
well, again, it depends on what my roster looks like. But let's assume that I have him and, decent enough wide receivers, and I don't have a running back one, because that's probably the situation you're in, unless you drafted Le'Veon in the second round, in which case you shouldn't trade because you're just going to win. But yeah, no, I feel like it depends on, in a vacuum, I think those two guys right now, but depending on my roster, I would maybe trade for some other guys too. So I don't think it's cut and dry, but in a vacuum, just in terms of value right now, I feel like Charles and DeMarco are the only two guys on his level.
Yeah, and I really hate running backs, so I think that's probably my first instinct. I never want to trade really good players for running backs. So I don't know. I mean, especially with that, Charles, he's already been banged up. I mean, of course, Megatron's banged up, and we've already seen the low water mark of his season, I think. But Charles is already banged up. With Murray, it's I always feel like I love DeMarco Murray. I love DeMarco Murray. He's a great player, but it's I feel like we're always waiting for the other shoe to drop there. So I don't know. I think it's tough. So my initial instinct was none, but I think you brought up all valid points.
Yeah, and I say Le'Veon Bell with a question mark. That's a real risky move, but
Yeah.
he's totally worth it if he keeps on doing 80% of what he's doing right now.
Yeah, I mean, I
So,
think Bell. I think Bell might be like the best running back in the league right now, but I don't think he's the best fantasy running back in the league right now. So,
yeah,
and the
um,
running, I
I don't
just the
know if I
running.
can call him the best at either, but I see where you're coming
Well,
from.
I mean, definitely,
I've got this weird aversion to
you
Le'Veon
do.
Bell that
You were one of the Trent Richardson comparing
yeah,
people before the
I
year.
was,
But see,
and
at least unlike Richardson, Le'Veon went and got not fat this offseason, where Trent is just
he
fat.
does he does look he looks really good and he's running really well, but he's not really making people miss as much as he's I don't know he is too, but like
Yeah, I don't
he
know. I mean, I don't know what your thing with him. Maybe he like didn't call your sister back or something. But I mean, he's good. He's really good. So I don't know. But
no
like there with fantasy, he is like he still had like I don't know. He's just I don't know. Maybe I'm just who knows.
yeah, he's an enigma for me, but I definitely like him enough to have him in that discussion, which says something about where I had him a few weeks ago. Maybe the one guy I regret just having like no shares of anywhere. I think I got him in a couple MFL tens during the like right after the weed thing where he was going in like
The
the
Bullet
third round.
brothers. Yeah.
Yeah, like I think I got him a couple times then, but otherwise I don't have too many shares of him. But
What
um,
about Forte? What about Forte?
I love Forte, just in general, but I don't think that I'd trade Megatron for him.
Yeah. If it was
I
a
don't think.
PPR league, I'd be much
See,
more.
but then
But
like,
then you're
how,
losing the wide receiver value out of
yeah,
it.
you're losing a wide receiver who sees ridiculous volume. Even with Golden Tate there, you still can expect ridiculous volume. So yeah, that's a great question. But I would definitively say DeMarco and Charles in pretty much every situation. But there are still some roster situations where I wouldn't do that. So um, it really depends. Like if you've got Le'Veon, like I said, if you've got Megatron and Le'Veon already, then I don't think you need to trade him for a running back. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where that comes into. So if you're in a dynasty league, then that question changes entirely. But
Right.
again, it's tough to talk about both at once. So if you want to ask
Mhm.
us about dynasty, definitely send us tweets and we will answer
Yeah.
dynasty questions on the show. Even so, do that. But as for now, we're kind of talking about redraft with that. Um, one other thing that someone had tweeted at me was he's been trying to trade Joik Bell, and he's shown me his roster before, and he does not start Joik Bell on a regular basis. It looks like he's got guys who can start, like he's not relying on Joik Bell to start. Um, and was offered Travis Kelce straight up for Joik Bell. Um, but he has Jordan Cameron on his roster, and considering Cameron's health issues and the fact that I'm assuming that you can probably flex a tight end because you can do that in most leagues right now. Would you trade Joik Bell for Travis Kelce?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I know like his snap per. I mean, his fantasy points per snap, his efficiency is just like it's insane right now. And I mean, he's doing all this like on Monday night on similar. I mean, on excuse me, on limited snaps. I'm tripping over my feet just talking about Travis Kelce because he's so awesome. But I mean, and honestly, like if this has got to be the end of any point you can trade for him, and I can't even see why anybody would trade him now because he just had that big blow up moment, on national TV where he was making crazy plays and just looking amazing. I don't see how anyone is gonna how you're gonna pry him away from anybody right now.
Yeah,
But I
definitely.
mean, but at the same time he was available on waiver wires before this week. I know I picked him up to replace Julius Thomas on a bye week in 1 week. I mean, in one league, and now
Yeah,
now he's going to be in my lineup every week. It's crazy. So, Kelsey is the man right now, and I mean, almost I would love to acquire him in any place I can. So Joik, while I think he's going to rebound and he'll have a decent season, it's like I mean, Kelsey could be a top 5 tight end, and it's a strenuous position right now. Anyways, there's not a lot of clarity there. So
definitely. I mean, Kelsey's situation is so unique because he's, not only is he a tight end, but he's almost in the Graham and Gronk conversation as the only guy who can catch the ball for his team. So
Yeah.
It's such a great situation to be in for a guy who's obviously dripping with talent, and hopefully his injury from last year doesn't mean that he's injury prone, because that would be the last guy that just from a personal standpoint, as wanting a guy to succeed. I don't think there's anyone who's as universally liked among fantasy analysts than Travis Kelce.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, he is that intersection of great college tape and just freak measurables where we can all just kind of hold hands and sing "Kumbaya" together. It's nice. It's nice
he,
to have one of those players.
he's over 6'2". Uh,
Yeah,
he ran a good 40. He's got huge hands.
he's got
Um,
wiggly hips or whatever.
yeah, he's not a heavy-legged waist bender.
He's also, I will say, for people like me, he's got great hair. He's super handsome. So I was tweeting.
Davis Maddox Twitter avatar right now is
Oh yeah,
fantastic. If you haven't seen it, he actually
yeah, it's
got
cute.
Travis Kelce to tweet at him
That's
after
awesome.
tweeting it, so that was totally awesome. Yeah,
Yeah, we
um,
love. I mean, you gotta love Kelsey.
Kelsey's pretty cool. Although apparently there were some character concerns with him in college, so but it seems like he's a pretty cool dude. So maybe it was
Makes me like him even more.
immaturity or whatever. Who knows? But definitely no issue with Travis Kelce at this point. But let's move on. Let's talk about Week 5 in the NFL. There are fewer bye weeks this week, so and for a lot of players, they've got returning heroes. Um, in terms of what are you getting tweets?
No. Oh, this is a text my girlfriend sent me, but it actually has something to do with football. But I won't
Goodness.
read it on the air. Nobody cares.
Stay focused, man. Stay focused. Anyway,
I'm here.
okay.
I'm here.
We got fewer bye weeks this week, so less less concerns with that. There's actually a lot of decent matchups this week, and Peyton's back. Thomas and Thomas are back. Monty Ball is back. Marshawn Lynch is back. Russell Wilson's back. There's so many fantasy relevant players who disappeared on us there just 4 weeks into the season, which just feels so weird. But let's go position by position and talk about some guys this week that we like and don't like. I will start. We'll talk about the quarterback position. I like both quarterbacks in the New Orleans-Tampa game, which is very tough for me to say.
Your boy Glennon.
My boy Mike Glennon. I don't think Mike Glennon is a good quarterback. Let's just get that out of the way right now. I don't think that he's a very good player, but I think that there are things that he does at times that are good, and I think that he has the potential to maybe be good if he keeps doing those things. He did them against Pittsburgh in terms of throwing the ball down the field. Last season, his yards per attempt was super low. He was not very aggressive at all, and when he did throw deep, it was just uncatchable. This year he's doing differently. He's looking downfield a little more, and it helped, and it showed in his game. So he's going up against New Orleans, who are a mess right now on defense. They are struggling to get to the quarterback consistently, and when Rob Ryan's sending his blitzes, the defensive backs aren't holding up the same way they were last year. So there's just so many issues there, and the Bucks beat up on a similarly bad defense in Pittsburgh, who have similar issues. Last week. So Glennon is a guy that's a QB streaming, because I always think from that perspective. Like obviously, Big Ben's got a matchup with Jacksonville. Eli goes up against the Falcons, but these aren't guys who are available in a lot of leagues. So and then on the other side, Drew Brees against the Bucks is the number one quarterback this week, because the Bucks are a mess in coverage. They've allowed 75% completion percentage all year to quarterbacks. Teams have been converting like 3rd and 20 against them, just because it's such soft coverage and nobody's being physical. I think PFF has Jonathan Banks as the worst cover corner in the NFL right now. So I really like Drew Brees for that reason, because he's been a little off this year, but one of the things that's really been getting to him from what I've seen is pressure, and the Bucks don't get that consistently either. So it's a situation where he should be able to pick them apart at home. It's only their second home game, so he's been on the road, which isn't where he's historically good. So I really like Breeze this week. You either have this guy or you don't, and if you have him, you're starting him anyway. But maybe for DFS, if you want to pay up at quarterback, that's the guy I would go for.
Yeah, that's a smart one. Another one, I think if you're going to want to pay up, I think you could pay up for Phillip Rivers this week. He's going against the Jets secondary. He's going to be at home. I think that's, if you're going to pay up for somebody, Rivers has probably been one of the best 3 or 4 quarterbacks this year. I mean, he's been great.
Yeah, and Andrew Luck,
Yeah,
Philip
Andrew
Rivers.
Luck. Some other lighter options. Maybe someone's. They might not be on all rosters, or they'll be cheaper here and there. Joe Flacco, gross, but I mean, he's going against the Colts. He did throw
Yeah.
3 touchdowns against the Panthers. Um, so,
Blake Bortles going to get up against the same Pittsburgh secondary that just let
yeah,
Mike Glennon throw for 2 touchdowns and nearly 300 yards.
for sure. Alex Smith, I think this Chiefs. I mean, I was definitely getting a little hot and bothered by the Chiefs' offense on Monday night. With Kelsey, with the 2 running backs, with Charles and Niall Davis. Niall Davis is really good too. He's really good. And Dwayne Bowe
His
even
speed
was
score is
making.
ridiculous. Niall Davis, but anyway.
Yeah. But I mean, no, I think he's a good player too, though. I think in the NFL.
He's another one where metrics Twitter and tape Twitter can combine to.
Yeah, but I don't think tape Twitter liked him very much coming out of school.
I'm sure they didn't. There's
But who cares?
issues with everybody.
Everybody's got problems with everybody. But anyways, little revenge game against the 49ers, but their secondary I think still has question marks, and there are some weapons now in Kansas City. I think Dwayne Bowe even had a little action over Darrelle Revis a few times, or underneath of Darrelle Revis, I don't know. But so Smith,
Yeah, I was gonna say on the side of the field where Darrelle Revis was playing. I don't know if it was really against Darrelle Revis, but yeah, I totally see.
you saw him in the camera frame with him, which obviously means that Revis was getting toasted by Dwayne Bowe.
Yeah,
But
that's
anyway,
my favorite thing is when people pull screenshots of receiver catching a pass with highly profiled defensive back in the same image. Like that doesn't mean that whatever. So it happened with the Bucks this week that they were actually running a scheme where Alteron Werner was actually dropping back as a safety because they had rotated their cover 2 to have Mark Barron act like he was blitzing, and he came out. And so people thought that Werner was just totally lost when in theory he was actually doing what he was supposed to do. So it's just one of those things where it's not always like, hey, look for the high-profile corner when somebody catches a pass and see if he's anywhere close, because defensive schemes are so tough to read because that's kind of what they're supposed to be.
Yeah, exactly. We don't know play calls either, and I think that's one thing that not to get off on a tangent, but we totally are. But the whole thing where you want to break down film and everything, and obviously that's awesome. I love doing it too. But it's like sometimes you don't know what they're actually trying to do. So
it's so tough to break that stuff down.
It is.
I'm hoping that the future of NFL Game Rewind comes with play calls.
Good luck with that.
Obviously that's
right. Okay, so what do we want to do? Running backs now? Get back on track?
Yeah, obviously. And the number one option for anyone in any league, in any format, is Le'Veon Bell this week against the Jaguars.
Oh, yeah.
The Jaguars are just awful. The game, it's either going to be high scoring or it's going to be a blowout, and either way that favors Bell. If you think that the Jaguars are going to get just absolutely stomped, which is legitimate, like I would go with LeGarrette Blount this week too if you have him. If you think that Pittsburgh's defense is bad enough to where this could be a contest, like it's all Bell, because they're just going to be able to lean on him for whatever they want, passing and running. But apart from him,
Bell is only, just a side note too, Bell is only like $7,000 something on DraftKings this week too. He's not even like the number 1 or 2 or 3 highly priced running backs. So.
Yeah, I mean their pricing has been kind of like that all season, but
there's a lot of good values. Kelsey's minimum price. How many? Travis Kelsey's going to pay me royalties like Number Fire pays you royalties from this podcast.
This will be a week to maybe bank on the LaShawn McCoy bounce back against the Rams.
Yeah.
They're not a bad defense, but they've been playing up to expectations. Their linebackers are kind of a mess. Matt Forte against the Panthers. The Panthers have been gouged this year in the run game. They're short on defensive linemen at this point. Luke Kuechly is good, but that's not enough to shy you away from that. And just to complete this, all of these running backs that you probably can't go out and get, I'll give you one of those in a second, is Marshawn Lynch against the Washington is another one that should be obvious. But in terms of guys that are out there that you may be able to go get, I really like Jerick McKinnon. on Thursday night. I feel like in a game that should be high scoring, that he may get some more opportunities. My only issue with him is that he can't catch, and that may phase him out of the game. But I do still feel like he's proven that he's a game-breaking player, and I compared the situation there in a recent article to the situation in Buffalo, where he is the C.J. Spiller and Matt Asiata is the Fred Jackson. Asiata gets the money carries and he gets the catches, but Spiller is the big play guy, and Spiller has the high ceiling. And I feel like it's the same way in Minnesota, and I feel like as the season grows on, and as McKinnon kind of gets used to things, because McKinnon's excuse, unlike Spiller, who kind of just doesn't get those snaps because he can't ever beat out Jackson for them, um, McKinnon's excuse is that a year ago he was playing quarterback. It was triple option quarterback, but this isn't a guy who came from a traditional college, and the fact that he's already contributing is kind of crazy. So if you're desperate at running back, I would definitely. I think McKinnon and Blunt are two really good running back waiver wire options this week that should be on waiver wires. I don't know about Blunt, but definitely McKinnon if he's still out there. I think you want him this week.
Yeah, that's a good call. I like McKinnon on Thursday night. Another few more under the radar running backs. Darren Reeves is like the last guy standing in Carolina right now. Maybe that's the guy they kind of rolled out on Sunday against the Ravens, but who knows? They signed Chris Obanaya, who's had some PPR relevance in the past before. Perhaps he gets to play. Torrin Poole is he's not very good, but none of these. I mean, who knows? So Reeves, if you're super desperate, I mean, I know you made fun of me for having him on a roster last week, but it's a 16-teamer that league or 14.
Yeah, it's pretty deep. Yeah.
I mean, at this point, I think you can stash Reeves and kind of see what you got. He has some skill. We'll see. I mean, it's not a good running team, so temper your expectations. But if you're super desperate, the Bears aren't exactly an intimidating defense either.
Definitely. And speaking of not intimidating defenses and a guy who might be out there, I would say that either of the Baltimore running backs, if they're on your waiver wire, and then by either I mean not Bernard Pierce, I mean Lorenzo Taliaferro or Justin Forsett. I would take either of those guys against Baltimore or against Indianapolis this week.
Yeah, and Forsett I think is like he'll be consistent. Like he'll be the guy that in PPR leagues he'll get a few catches every week, and he looks good. I mean Taliaferro he'll be kind of touchdown dependent. I think Forsett will actually in PPR leagues give you a good base value to work with.
Definitely. So let's move on to wide receivers.
Yay.
Vincent Jackson, Keenan Lewis has not really been all that great this year, and the New Orleans defense in general hasn't. And that is, for all intents and purposes, that is Mike Glennon's guy. He looked at Lewis Murphy. He'll throw to Austin Seferian-Jenkins, but his long-standing chemistry is with Vincent Jackson. And we saw it when the game was on the line against the Steelers. He was throwing to Vincent Jackson. And I feel like that's going to continue. And if you have Vincent Jackson, you need to put him back in your lineup if he was out before, because this is the time when you want him. This is what you got him for if you drafted him. So that's a guy. I also like Kelvin Benjamin against the Bears this week. Even though
another cheap one on DraftKings, 4,800.
Yeah, and I don't like Kelvin Benjamin really all that much as a prospect, but he's been proving me wrong, and so I'll continue to bank on that. Brandon Cooks is also very cheap on DraftKings, and a guy that going up against the Bucs. There's no one on that defense who's as fast as him, and with the way they're playing soft coverage, he's going to get the ball in space multiple times in this game. So I really like Brandon Cooks for that reason, and going like I said a little deeper. Allen Robinson, Allen Hurns. It's kind of tough to choose, but Cecil Shorts hurt himself again last week. Marquise Lee has been hurt all season. I mentioned Mike Brown last time, but it seems like Mike Brown just doesn't get any love from Blake Bortles in the regular season. So it's really down to the two Allens, and it's really up to you to choose. Allen Robinson is the better football player. Allen Hurns has had the better production so far and is probably a better pure speed deep threat guy, although it's really arguable because he's just kind of tripped and fell into a couple of really good situations so far. So, but I think that either one, if you're hurting at wide receiver, is a good pickup this week.
Yeah, those are some good names, especially the Jacksonville ones. I think Brian Quick is that dude this weekend. Quick is I wrote about him for Football Guys last week. I did a reception perception on. If you're not familiar with that, you should be. Talk to me about it on Twitter, I guess. Uh, but
Basically,
yeah,
you look in depth at a receiver's production in different situations and on different routes and stuff like that. Right?
yeah, exactly. Success rate versus coverage. What routes are they getting open on? How are they getting open? And how much of their routes are they getting targeted on? Yeah, yada yada. Lots of cute little charts, all that crap. And so Brian Quick, yeah, he looks good. I mean, he looks really, really good, and he's the number one in that offense right now. And they're facing the Eagles this week, and the Eagles have not been a good defense at all.
And Austin Davis remains the quarterback. So.
Oh, is that official now?
Yeah, Jeff Fisher announced that today.
Thank God. Davis looks good, and he's another one. He looks pretty good for what he is. He looks pretty good.
Yeah, for an undrafted rookie. Yeah, absolutely.
From
Not a rookie,
Southern Mississippi or whatever he's from. Yeah, so he looks pretty good. So he can do more than keep Quick viable. So I think that's a really good play this week. Across the board, Sammy Watkins, maybe now that he doesn't have E.J. Manuel as his quarterback, I think that Kyle Orton can come in there and feed him a little bit more. And, the Lions' defense has been good. Orton will see some pressure. I think hopefully they'll just do the same thing now. Now that they have that giant anchor that is E.J. Manuel out of the starting quarterback spot, hopefully they can just get the ball to the running backs and feed Watkins on quick hitting plays. And so I think that Orton can do that pretty well for them. I like Keenan Allen not bounce back, but keep it up after a good week against Jacksonville. And Eddie Royal too. Honestly, I know it's gross. I know it's so fluky.
I can't let you continue.
No. Let me speak.
You cannot recommend Eddie Royal.
I'm just saying, I know it's disgusting, and I know everybody hates it because nobody has Eddie Royal except the people that rush, people I'm talking about, rush out and take last week's big performer, even though it makes no sense to pick him up.
The people who pick up Kevin Ogletree every week.
Exactly. Yeah. So I know those are all the people that have it on their roster.
And they're not watching. They're not going to watch this. So you don't recommend it.
I'm not. I'm saying for those.
Plus, it's October. It's October. The pumpkin has turned, or the carriage has turned back into a pumpkin.
We might get one more week out of it. Facing the Jets. I'm just saying.
Floyd. Let me list the people who catch passes on that team that are better wide receivers than Eddie.
Everybody, but that's not the point.
Keenan Allen, Malcolm Floyd, Antonio Gates, Ladarius Green, Seyi Tutu,
Vincent Brown. Oh wait.
And whoever their right tackle is. Those are all better wide receivers than Eddie Royal.
TJ Fluker.
Is it TJ Fluker? That was totally unintended, but yeah, I bet he probably is a better wide receiver than Eddie Royal. No, yeah.
I'm just saying.
Here's the thing with Eddie Royal is that, like you said, you probably don't have him because somebody else probably overreacted and picked him up, and he's not viable in daily fantasy this week because his prices have skyrocketed.
Yeah, right. That's a good point. I'm just saying.
If you're going to spend in daily fantasy on a Charger wide receiver, you cannot spend on him because he is the definition of touchdown dependent. If you wanted to, if there was a fantasy football dictionary and you wrote out a description for fantasy or touchdown dependent, he would be the example. Him and John Kuhn, they are the touchdown dependent fantasy football options. Sean
right. He's also terrible, but that's another one of your boys. So sorry.
Aren't I even on my bet as to him or scoring more touchdowns than Cordero Patterson? Don't they both have one touchdown?
I don't know what you're talking about.
I
don't know what.
Let's move on to tight ends before you cry over Cordero Patterson and scoring. Zach Ertz against the Rams. Again, their linebackers are a mess. They're not really that talented in the defensive backfield. So I like Ertz because it seems to be the one guy, him and Macklin are the guys that Foles leans on when he's doing well. So I do like that. Larry Donnell against the Falcons. The Falcons are a mess on pass defense, and I'm going to keep going back to Larry Donnell if I've got him. If you picked him up, keep using him because you got to get your value from him somewhere. Heath Miller against the Jaguars. Heath Miller should be more involved in that offense. Even though you may think he's too old or whatever, he's rock solid. He knows how to get open, and so that's a guy you want. And obviously big name guy, but Julius Thomas playing against the Cardinals. I know the Cardinals have been better on off or on defense this year than many expected, but they're still the Cardinals, and it's still a tight end. So, I'm just not going to trust that they're going to, shut down a tight end. Like they started off with, giving up 81 yards to Antonio Gates, and then they gave up 81 yards to Larry Donnell, and so they can still give up volume to tight ends. So, maybe they're not as exploitable as they were last year, but yeah, I still, if you've got Julius Thomas or if you're playing daily, like he's going to be expensive, but
Pay up
very
for
good guys that are worth it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, how about your boy ASJ in Tampa?
See, here's the thing about Austin Swearinger-Jenkins.
He's a big guy.
He is. I think that if his hands were bigger, he probably would have gone in the first round because people would have thought he was the next coming of Rob Gronkowski, but they're not, and he's not.
He does not.
He's really good though.
Like Gronk or Kelsey, that's the thing. Looks like him, but doesn't play like him.
Yeah, but I mean, there were some things about how he played in college that had to do with his playing weights being weird and stuff. So, he's a great player, and I've really liked what I've seen from him so far. But ultimately, he's a rookie tight end and a highly touted rookie tight end, and those don't usually pan out, but that's kind of anecdotal too. So, but also, people like to think that Glennon's going to maybe lean on him, and Glennon did lean on Tim Wright last year, and obviously being both tight ends, that's something that could happen again. The Bucs do still have Brandon Myers, and they've got Louis Murphy, who Louis Murphy came into the game when Mike Evans left with an injury and promptly became Glennon's favorite target. So I'm not convinced that ASJ is going to see the volume. Obviously, this is a good matchup and everything like that. And then I'm just concerned that when Josh McCown comes back that he's not going to throw to ASJ because I feel like it's more likely that Glennon would throw to him, and I'm not convinced that Glennon's going to keep starting. So because Lovie Smith is stubborn and may just stick with Josh McCown. So if you want to pick up ASJ, if you're hurting at tight end, like I said, I don't hate it, but like I feel like you're probably more likely to have Heath Miller on your waiver wire too, and I'd rather have Heath Miller. But if you're hurting at tight end and you don't have any other options, like I'd rather roll him out there than Dwayne Allen this week, a guy like that. So I don't think he's the worst pick, but there are red flags there that I could see a 2-catch for 20-yard game from him.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a deeper one. This one is even more, maybe even a little bit deeper than that. Luke Wilson against the Redskins. If you're a real sicko tight end streamer, Wilson has some, he has some potential. He's an athletic guy, and the Redskins stink on defense. Their safeties are so bad.
Yeah, absolutely. And Zach Miller's out, which
and that's right. I should probably mention the biggest point in all this is their starting tight end Zach Miller's hurt. Wilson should get some opportunities. Delaney Walker's
a blocker too, which keeps him on the field. So
on a run-heavy offense, for sure. Delaney Walker is about the only thing working right now for the Titans offense, especially in the passing game. So I think he'll continue to see volume no matter who the quarterback is.
What are your thoughts on Marquise Gray?
I don't know.
Because I feel like there's too many passes that need to be completed in that Minnesota offense for him to not get a few. I'm not gonna invest in him, but if I've got a deep bench league or if I desperately need a tight end, I feel like you could do worse.
Well, if you're looking for someone to play this week, I would want to know that Teddy's going to play for sure. I mean, we haven't met.
Well, is that true, or is that leaning on a tight end with a bad quarterback? Well,
it would help me if Ponder and Gray had any sort of prior connection, but
sure. Isn't Gray their emergency quarterback too? Wasn't he a college quarterback?
I think that's true. I'm not totally sure, but that sounds right.
So that would be funny if you started him at tight end and then their quarterback situation got so bad that you were getting quarterback points for him. But
now that would be something. That would be a breaking the code right there.
Yeah. Didn't that happen a few years ago where a guy, Joe Webb, where he was a wide receiver starting at quarterback?
Joe Webb, current Panthers number 3 quarterback.
Goodness gracious. I'm hoping that one day Julian Edelman gets that shot. that the
Oh.
Patriots just want to incite something in their offense. And,
Well, their starting quarterback is so bad right now. What's his name again?
yeah.
I don't know. Some sixth rounder that just looks out of his
Yeah,
depth.
like they've stuck with him for so long, but it's time to
Time
pull.
to move on. Did you see Evan Silva had the tweet of the night, by the way, with all this Aaron Dobson stuff going on? I don't know if you saw it, but anybody else that's listening right now, Evan Silva dropped. He said, "I hope," because apparently Aaron Dobson's being benched because he mouthed off to Josh McDaniels, and Evan Silva came in and said, "I hope Tom Brady mouths off to Josh McDaniels so he can get benched for Garoppolo, and Garoppolo can save all the Gronk shares." Oh, that was great on so many different levels.
Oh goodness. And then we never do this, but defenses. We've mentioned Pittsburgh a couple times because they're playing the Jaguars, but the
What's a
Pittsburgh defense is probably out there, and
yeah,
it just whatever. Like that's one that if you're desperate for them, but otherwise, like there are so many better options that like if you need to pick them up, you can, but I feel like that you probably have a better choice right there. I would take either defense in the Cleveland-Tennessee game over them, but we don't really focus too much on defense, but if you have any this week, you can definitely throw them out there.
Cleveland's a good one. That's one that I've picked up to stream a little bit. They've gotten dropped a lot. Pittsburgh, sure, yeah, they're not a good defense, and it's probably more the mystique talking that, ooh, Pittsburgh against a rookie quarterback. But, yeah, and I mean, Bortles definitely makes the offense better than Henny did, that's for sure.
Yeah, but it's still not good. Like I still
right. He'll still probably throw an interception.
Yeah, exactly.
And same thing, too, with the Chargers against the Jets. Chargers are at home. The Jets' offense is kind of reeling right now. So they could probably get one in their favor. So that's another one. But they're probably...
A lot of people have asked me about Green Bay against Minnesota, and I'm not going to suggest Green Bay against Minnesota.
I'm not going to risk it because, I mean, sure, maybe Ponder plays, and that would be nice. But this is also not a good defense.
You can decide as the week starts, though. Like an hour before kickoff, you can drop that defense for somebody else if you need to.
That's nice. That's a nice little aspect. Still, either way, I mean...
I don't want them anyway, because I don't think they're a good defense.
No, they're not a good defense. And Teddy, if he starts, I mean, I have confidence in him. So there's a unique take.
Philadelphia would be another one against St. Louis, even though it is, you talked about Brian Quick and Austin Davis, but
Eagles are so bad, though.
They are really bad, but again, like this is talking like if you need a defense. Like these are defenses that are out there, because like if you've got Cincinnati or Detroit or whatever this week, like you just want to start your good defenses.
And it's a perfect example of how fluky defenses can be, that the Eagles are such a bad defense, and they scored two touchdowns last week. So who the hell knows? Yeah,
it's really a situation where like overall season performance correlates to how good the defense is, but week to week does not, because week to week is touchdown dependent. And last year, like the top 5 defenses were the top 5 defenses. Like they matched up pretty well. Like it was not exact, but like the top defenses were all top defenses. But the Chiefs were so far ahead of everybody else because they also scored touchdowns. So, and the Patriots actually have kind of built their mystique of being a good defense and special teams, not only because they've been good on defense, but also because they've gotten touchdowns. So that is something to keep an eye on that you can't really predict. So don't get caught up in a defense that has scored a bunch of points before, because that doesn't always help you. With the Eagles, as a perfect example, don't keep picking them up because they've scored a bunch of points this year, because they're not going to continue to do that every week. They gave up a big game to Kirk Cousins, and consider what that means.
Right. So you want to talk kickers next?
I don't think.
No, I'm kidding.
How about IDPs? I really like J.J. Watt this week and every week.
I
don't even know if they're playing. Is Houston even playing?
They are playing.
Okay.
They're playing.
I really like J.J. Watt.
I've never heard of any of these players.
Patrick Willis, I've heard that he's good. I don't do IDPs very often. So, and the one league where I do have IDPs, they're awful.
Down.
So
2 thumbs down for this segment.
Yeah.
For the IDP segment.
Sorry, if you guys want to ask us questions, I'll try to answer them, but don't expect there are much better resources out there for IDP.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I have only done one IDP draft ever, and it does seem like a thing you got to get the hang of. I mean, just because there's great. That's one thing I think I've understood is that you don't draft defensive backs very high because their performance is so fluky. But
Yes. Yeah, that is one thing that I learned is that there's basically a tier of defensive back ones and then a huge tier of defensive back threes, and there are no twos and there are no fours and fives. Like every starting defensive back is in theory a defensive back three, and then there are just a few that are ones because they just get an uncharacteristic amount of tackles and interceptions and tip balls and stuff. But yeah, let's not talk about IDPs anymore because I don't know what I'm talking about here. Do you have any final comments or thoughts about Week 5 in the NFL?
Well, I think we covered it. I think we did a pretty good job.
I do too.
I like what we did there.
Yes, I feel like we covered everything, and we've gotten you ready for the week. But if we haven't got you ready, and you do have another question, you can ask us on Twitter. Matt, where can people find you on the Twitters?
That's a very professional transition there, Leo. I like that. You can find me at MattHarmon_BYB. I'm always willing to answer questions and talk on Twitter. It's a fun thing to do. Please send anything our way.
Yeah, absolutely. I have no life outside of this. I was actually just commenting to Matt before the show that I don't really interact with other human beings all that often, except for on Twitter.
Yeah, Leo really has no life. I actually have a day job, so.
And a girlfriend, and yes, you mentioned all this stuff. Who cares?
Yeah, I have a dog, a girlfriend. I'm moving into a new apartment.
I have a dog.
Nice.
And I have a family that I hang out with. But
now this is just getting mean.
I'm not a social person. I prefer the simpler things in life. But anyway, you can find me at Leo Howell 8. You can see it right here on my lower third, along with this graphic that is awful and out of place. The graphic's cool.
The graphic is way cool.
But the place that it is on the thing sucks.
Remember the crappy ones I sent you a while back?
Yeah, they were
really bad.
I'll be nice.
No, they were really bad.
They were really bad. You can find me on at Leo Howell 8 on Twitter. You can ask me questions whenever. I'm happy to answer and kind of go back and forth. I've got a few people that I kind of advise on a lot of things, and that's fun for me. Even though I may lead you astray, because ultimately I am just a fantasy football player, just like you. I just spend more time thinking about it than most people. But that leads to me overthinking, and that can be a bad thing too. So, but definitely hit us up. You can find Matt's work over at thebackyardbanter.com, where he does a lot of stuff. You can also find him at footballguys.com and Sportable Hangout.
Sportable.is.
Yeah.
Where I do a few things there. I do a game day blog where I'm just giving all my rapid reactions as they come to me, which can be pretty fun and scary. And I also, and we mentioned earlier that Dan Schneier, my co-host of every Sunday morning, we do a hangout, hot takes and hot cakes. It's a lot of fun to start off Sunday morning with. So if anyone hasn't checked that out yet, it's a good one. And
I'm coming around on the name, by the way.
It sticks. It sticks.
It's pretty good.
No pun.
I get them backwards though. Like I think I said hot cakes and hot takes, and I think it's the other way around. But
now that you mention it, I don't know.
See, like that's
hot takes. I think it's hot takes and hot cakes.
Yeah. But
I should probably know this.
Yeah, you should probably know that. And you can find me at Numberfire, which I did not mention in this entire show. You did. I did not. I did not mention Numberfire for the entire show.
Well, tell JJ that I expect my check in the mail.
JJ's not going to send you any checks.
Well, he sends you checks.
He does. Well, PayPal's. But
well, I meant for royalties for mentioning the name.
Yes, and you can find me also at Roto Grinders, where I do weekly tape breakdowns. I had one earlier this week talking about the Minnesota running back situation that I mentioned, and I will have one tomorrow that will talk about Drew Brees, that will talk about why you should target the Bucs defense and some other stuff. So definitely take a look at that. And I also write at Bucs Nation, but you don't want to read that because it's depressing. Really depressing. Particularly because now any success that the Buccaneers have with Mike Glennon under quarterback just makes me wrong because I thought that he wasn't good last year. So clearly because I thought that he wasn't wrong last year, I thought that he could never win NFL games because those two things go together. Because quarterbacks are the sole reason that teams win and lose football games, according to the internet. let me just put this on another medium because I've said this in writing and I've said this on other podcasts. I'll say this on a video podcast. Wins are not a quarterback statistic. Quarterbacks are one of 40-ish players that play on a football field every week, and they only play in 1/3 of the phases of the game, and they do not coach, except for Peyton, who kind of is a coach. But yeah, that's kind of what makes him good. So if you want to talk to me about that, you can, but if you think something different than that, you're wrong. But that'll do it for this episode of the Fantasy Game Plan. Yeah, dropping the knowledge bombs on everybody here. I'm Leo. He's Matt, and we will see you guys again at this time next week. I'm going to click through to you so you can get the peace sign here at the end before I go off. Do the peace sign again. There you go. Okay, cool. All right, guys. See you. No, I don't want to do that.